Hey everybody, I'm Robin from Backscatter here.
Jim from Backscatter here.
And in this video, we're doing a complete underwater review of the Sony a7 IV. So Jim, you spent some time underwater with this rig. Tell us what makes it cool.
Well, the a7 IV is a pretty major upgrade over the previous model a7 III. It's got a higher resolution sensor, much improved autofocus, and also now for those video shooters, it'll now do an underwater white balance at depth for an ambient light, looking great.
That makes it sound like a pretty versatile and capable camera. Let's dive into everything that underwater photographers need to know. So Jim, in the past, it's been kind of easy to overlook the base model camera in this lineup. Can you explain to us how this new one fits in the overall A7 lineup and like what sets it apart?
Sure, let's go over that. So there's basically three different camera models in the A7 lineup. You've got the S model, which is more video-centric, lower resolution sensor, better video specs. Then you have the R model, which is more photocentric. Very high-end photo, talking some of the best photos you've ever seen out of a camera. With the base model, it kind of sits in the middle in terms of resolution and performance overall, and at a lower price point.
So let's go into that a little bit deeper. Tell us more about the specs on the S and the R models and what you are missing out on or what you might gain with the a7 IV.
Right, so in the S model, you're dealing with a 12 megapixel sensor. It doesn't sound like a lot, but if you think about it, it's more designed for video use and you don't need high resolution for 4K video. You can get 4K 120, full width of the sensor out of that thing. The video looks fantastic. It's got fast read rates on it, so you don't get a lot of rolling shutter on your video. The white balance looks fantastic. And with the lower resolution sensor, you get a lot of great low light capability.
Okay, so how about the photo camera? How's that stack up?
For the R model, it's all about resolution and photo detail. You have 61 megapixels of resolution, which is an insane amount of detail you can get in a photo. Makes it great for portraits, makes it great for massive prints. Also, cropping a vertical from a horizontal works really well with that. You still have plenty of resolution left over for that. It's not as good on the video side as the other camera, the S model, but it will get some video done for sure.
And so how do they meet in the middle, or what's the compromise with the base model camera here?
So the base model camera here, the compromise that we're going to have coming from the video side, you're only going to have 4K 60.
Okay.
And the 4K 60 is going to come from a 1.5 crop of the sensor. So you're going to be cropping a little bit from that. So if you're using something like a 1635, on the wide side, it's not going to be all that good, but if you're using a fisheye lens like the 8-15 with one of the Sigma or Metabones converters, then you get a little bit of zoom range, so I would see a little bit of benefit there. On the macro side of things, using Sony 90 macro, with that crop, there's maybe a little bit of benefit if you think about it, because what you have to do to get the same framing, if you were just full frame, you'd have to back the camera up a little bit. When you do that, you get a little bit more depth of field. And a little bit more depth of field in macro, sometimes that's a lot easier to deal with as far as framing and shooting. So I think there's some pros and cons to both sides of having that crop for the video.
And how about on the photo side of things? How's that stack up?
Well, on the photo side of things, we're kind of splitting the difference here. We're at 33 megapixels now. So that is a pretty big step up from 12 from the S model. It's also pretty big drop down from the 61 megapixels, but 33 megapixels, that's a pretty good amount of resolution. I know the a7 III, the previous base model camera, was only 24 megapixels. And a lot of people are like,
that's not that different from a compact camera, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, is this enough for me? Now at 33, I think this is looking pretty good on the resolution side of things. Yeah, it's not gonna have as much detail as the R model, but it's gonna be pretty darn good for less of a price.
So you already told us that that image quality upgrade on this was one of the things that makes it cool. Let's talk about that autofocus performance you mentioned too. What's new with that on this camera?
Well, the autofocus performance compared to a7 III is light years ahead of where it used to be. As far as the focus is concerned, the best test for anything is going to be macro, because you're dealing with limited depth of field, micro moves of the camera, put things in and out of focus. So that's where you're going to see the improvements. In the past, the a7 III with the 90 macro was unusable for autofocus. It just would not lock onto anything. It would just hunt all the time. And the only way you could really use that lens was through manual focus. So now with the A7 IV, some of the autofocus from the higher end cameras in the Sony lineup have now trickled down into this camera. And so now I can say without a doubt that this will focus with the Sony 90 macro, no problem. You can focus right down to the limits of the lens, even through a diopter, you'll still get some good focus.
That's pretty amazing. So then you would also mention an upgrade to the ambient light white balance for video side of things. What can this do now?
So ambient light white balance kind of started with the A7S III, the video-centric model. When that one came out, they came out with a whole new processing engine, and it went from one of the worst performing ambient light white balance cameras to one of the best performing ambient light white balance cameras. And that technology has also trickled down into the A7 IV. And so the video you get from this now with ambient white light balance looks absolutely perfect, even at depths approaching 70, 80, 90 feet.
Jim, I know you shot the Nauticam housing for the review, but what other underwater housings are available for this camera?
Fortunately, there's a lot of support for the A7 IV underwater. So there's housings available from Icolite, Seacam, Aquatica, CNC, and Asoda.
So Jim, what was the performance of the camera like in the water? What did it really feel like to shoot this thing?
Okay, let's talk about two things. Let's talk about the speed of shooting as far as how many frames per second it can do, and also how the shutter feels as well.
Yeah, okay.
So as far as speed of shooting is concerned, this will do 10 frames per second in RAW in a lossy RAW format. So lossy RAW format, I'm not a fan of because it's a compression model. And so when you have that and you compress things, the blue channel tends to go first as far as the image quality. And you might get some banding in that. So I'm not a fan of shooting in that.
Yeah, it's like not really raw.
Right, so the other way you can shoot is 6 frames per second in a lossless RAW. And if you think about it, most underwater shooters, what they're doing is using strobes. 6 frames per second is plenty fast enough to keep up with strobes, for sure. Then if you're doing something like a sardine run or something like that, where you're shooting without strobes, you're doing a lot of fast shooting, this may not be the camera for you. You might want to go to a higher performing camera as far as how many frames it'll shoot per second. But for the average shooter, this will be more than adequate.
Okay, awesome. And what did you notice about the shutter? What's that about?
So on the shutter, what I noticed is that there is a little bit of a lag with the shutter compared to the higher end Sony cameras.
Okay.
I came onto the A7 IV right after shooting their flagship model, the A1, which we haven't talked about yet. But I think that coming from that to this, you can definitely notice a little bit of a lag in the shutter from the time you pull to the time it takes the picture.
Okay, so not that big of a deal, you would say?
Not that big of a deal. It's something, if you're coming from a higher end camera, you just need to get used to. If you're coming from a lower end camera, you probably wouldn't notice it at all.
So you just mentioned the A1. How does that compare to the A7 IV?
So both of those cameras are kind of aimed at what I call hybrid shooters, people that want to do both photo and video. So with the A1, it is the ultimate performance camera of like all time. It's got high resolution, 50 megapixel sensor. It's got speed of shooting to 20 frames per second, lossless RAW, like I mentioned earlier. It's got the super fast autofocus performance, and it does 4K 120 and 8K 30 video, along with a really good ambient light white balance. So that's like top notch. But that comes at a price. The price is $6,500 for that camera body, where this one is only about $2,499, so about $4,000 less for the A7 IV. So if that's a little bit too much for your budget, in here what you get is you still get the hybrid shooting capability where you get excellent underwater white balance for video, 4K 60. You're not going to get 4K 120, so you'll compromise there. And on the resolution, you're at 33 megapixels instead of 50. So again, a drop in the resolution, but unless you're doing billboard-sized prints, that's plenty of resolution for most people.
Or unless you can easily justify a $4,000 more expensive camera body.
Yep, exactly.
So Jim, tell me who this camera is made for. Who should be getting the most stoked about the Sony a7 IV?
You know, the interesting thing is this camera has been kind of overlooked in this series in the past with the base model. The a7 III, the performance on it wasn't fantastic from either a resolution or an autofocus standpoint. Autofocus is basically unusable. The white balance underwater was basically unusable. And we've got a 180-degree turnaround on all of that now. We've got high resolution at 33 megapixels. We've got the ambient light underwater white balance. It looks fantastic at depth. And so I think this camera can now be considered something for the hybrid shooter, like we were talking about with the A1. Yeah, it's not gonna match the same video specs of 4K 120 with either the S model or the A1. It's at 4K 60, but that's still a very respectable video spec. You can still slow it down from 60 frames per second to 30 frames, get that nice smooth motion, slow motion effect. So I think that's great there. And like I said, it's like on the photo side, the autofocus and the speed of shooting and the resolution are now enough to be considered a decent photo camera as well. So if you're looking to get into a Sony camera on a budget and you're a hybrid shooter, this certainly fits the bill. This is like $4,000 less than a Sony A1. That's a pretty big price difference. That being said, you also might want to take a really hard look at the A7R5, because A7R5 now, that is 61 megapixels. It is the R model. It has the higher resolution with that. It also is only about $1,400 more. Now, $1,400 I know is a lot of money, but if you think about getting the camera, the housing, strobes, arms, lenses, dome ports, travel case, all that kind of stuff, when you think about all that, $1,400 as a percentage of the transaction isn't that much of a difference. So you might consider going to that as well. But I do think that you're getting a very, very big step up from the previous model a7 III with this one.
Jim, thank you very much for your take on this camera. That was an awesome breakdown of pretty much everything that underwater photographers need to know, huh?
Yeah, I think it's a great camera and I had a hoot shooting it.
Awesome, man. Well, if you want to learn more about any of the other Sony cameras that we talked about, we've got all of our reviews and video content from those linked down below in the video description. And remember, you can help us keep making more of these reviews and bringing you this info by buying your camera gear from us here at Backscatter. We dive, shoot, and service everything we sell. Every purchase includes free lifetime tech support, and we ship internationally every day. If you ever have a question about anything, you want to know anything about this gear, you want us to put together a quote for your system, you can check out our website, or you can just pick up the phone and give us a call. That's what we're here for. I'm Robin from Backscatter, signing off.
I'm Jim from Backscatter, signing off.
And we'll catch you on the next one.